This is the ManbaOne Pro controller. Is it good for fighting games? Let's find out. What I have here is an updated version. They increased the polling rate, added dead zone customization, and overall just a little more accurate in terms of FPS performance. It comes in this box right here, and you don't see packaging like this often anymore. Kind of reminds me of the PS4 packaging, right? Kind of old school, but I like it. This guy works for the Switch, the PC, and smartphones. Comes with the controller itself, obviously. We have an USB-A to USB-C cable. This is about 6 feet long. You also get 2 longer stick caps. And I'm a big fan of this, a charging dock. You plug in your cable here, and then you set the controller down. Very convenient. If you flip it around, open this guy up. This is where you store the dongle. On the PC, you can obviously play it wired or wireless via this dongle right here. This controller also supports Bluetooth as well, but you cannot use it on the PC. Bluetooth modes are only on the Switch and the smartphones. And honestly, I think that's a good thing because Bluetooth is so terrible for gaming on the PC. There's just so much interference. So having a dedicated dongle is the way to go. Let's talk about the controller itself. This is one beautiful controller. This guy and the Xbox 20th Anniversary Edition are the 2 best looking controllers I have. You have a clear see-through faceplate here. There's this little gap here, you can pop it open. Same thing over here. Just take it out. You can see the magnets here, so it attaches it to the screws of the controller. How smart is that? Just put magnets on the screws. It makes so much sense, right? And you can also replace the stick caps by pulling this guy out, just like that, and then putting a new one in. Now we have a longer one and a shorter one. And we also have the RGBs on the sides. It's just a strip along the handle here with a lot of gaming stuff. You know, it's just kind of outrageous and over the top, right? This is just classy. In terms of the handles, this is hard plastic all the way around. There's some textures here, but it's also pretty smooth. But with that being said, because of the clear plastic on the faceplates here, it's pretty grippy up here. It doesn't slip out of your hands or anything if you have sweaty palms. It looks nice, but it's also built really nice too. No flex whatsoever. This thing is built like a tank. The Xbox controller is 8.6 ounces, and the ManbaOne is heavier at 10.4 ounces. Even though it's heavier, I wouldn't say this is heavy. I feel that this is just the right weight, honestly. Alright, let's go around the controller. This is an Xbox layout. You also have an LCD screen here. There's no app or anything. All of the adjustments and button mappings is going to be done on the screen right here. The shoulder and trigger buttons are Xbox style. The shoulder buttons are pretty nice and clicky. However, it's anchored on the inside, so it's kind of hard to press it in here. It's doable, but it's kind of hard. It's really meant for you to use the knuckles of your finger to press it on the edge on the outside. And look at how short and stubby the trigger buttons are. Look how cute they are. These are the smallest triggers I've ever seen. The tension on here are actually pretty light. It's even lighter than on an Xbox controller. You also get trigger locks here as well. There you go. And you know what's cool about these trigger locks? It's the way that it's positioned. Right? It's right here, it's really accessible. So when you hold your controller like this and you want to switch it, just flip it up or flip it down. Look at that. Super easy to switch back and forth. You also get 4 back buttons. These look like paddles, but they are actually buttons that are built in onto the controller. The bottom 2 buttons are very easily accessible, very clicky, but the top 2 buttons are a little harder to access. I can do my backdash pretty easily with it. In terms of the joysticks, these are pretty light. They have concave stick caps, and hopefully you can see it. There's textures around the stick cap here. It's pretty grippy. I have no problem with it. They rotate pretty smoothly. And these joysticks are Hall effects, so you don't have to worry about stick drifts over time. The triggers are also Hall effects as well. This controller actually have dual Hall effects. The face buttons have mic switches. You can press both of them at the same time, no problem. You can play claw if you want. Alright, so far so good, right? And honestly, this could have been one of my favorite controllers ever. I love the way it looks, it's gorgeous. The layout is great, the buttons feel great. It's got all the features that I want. And this controller is great for all types of games, except fighting games. And the reason being is the D-pad needs a lot of improvement. On the surface, it looks good, right? It even feels good. It feels like they use metal switches. And I love the hybrid D-pad on the Xbox controller. This is super accurate and tactile. I just love this thing. However, not all D-pads are created equal. Even if they look the same and feel the same. Allow me to explain. Some of you may have seen my review of the DualSense controller, and I complained that the D-pad is so loose, and because it has a lot of give, oftentimes when you press the edge of the D-pad in one direction, it's going to activate a diagonal when you don't want to. Well, this D-pad actually has the opposite problem. There is no give at all. It doesn't really matter if I'm pressing it on the lower edge or the upper edge. As you can see here, only one direction comes out. And it's the same with other direction as well. And that may sound like a great thing, right? If you want to press diagonals, you just press two buttons at once. In theory, yes. However, in practice, you're gonna need some give. You're gonna need a little bit of wiggle. This thing does not wiggle at all, right? It's super stiff. And because of that, you're gonna have to activate both switches at once to activate a diagonal. And that makes the window and the angle to activate diagonals so small and so precise that oftentimes you're not going to activate a diagonal. You're going to just do back or down when you actually want to do down back. And what makes the problem worse is this thing is a one-piece D-pad. Had it been separated like this, you can feel it better, right? You can feel that, okay, I'm pressing both buttons at once. But with this guy, you just can't really tell. It just all feel kind of the same. There's just a tiny angle here that you can press. See, if you're just a little bit up or a little bit to the right, you're gonna miss it. Okay, see, I tried to do a diagonal there. And if you look, because I press down on the button and the back switch activate first, then the kick button registers, and then the down button gets overlapped and register after the kick. So the result here is you just miss your diagonal. Furthermore, notice the gap around the D-pad. It's just so small. So when I press forward, you see it's hitting the edge of the faceplate. Now what if you take out the faceplate? Same thing, unfortunately. And the switches themselves are pretty heavy already. Not having a bigger gap here makes it even harder. For the next revision, they really need to loosen up this D-pad because as of right now, it's super stiff and unforgiving. So what's the lesson here? The lesson here is if your D-pad is too loose, this is going to give you a wider angle of diagonals. But when it's too stiff like this is going to give you no angle at all to press diagonals. When it comes to motion inputs, this D-pad is a lot better. However, I will say this, the surface is kind of sticky, especially if you have sweaty palms and sweaty fingers like I do. After a while, it's kind of hard to move your thumb around. But of course, the diagonal problem still exists in 2D fighters like this. So for example, you see I'm holding down back, right? And he's just walking backwards. Look at that. One way to get around it, if you really insist on using this D-pad for fighting games, is to program these back buttons to the directional buttons. So for example, I program these two to down and these two to up. Whenever I want to do down back, I would press one of these buttons and then back. Look at that. Would you jump? if you want to play that way, you're gonna need to retrain your brain on how to use the controller. You're gonna need to do gymnastics with your finger just to do a diagonal. And for me, I'm not sure if that's worth the time investment. And that is truly unfortunate because the rest of the controller is just so good. This could have been the perfect controller. Now, by far, my favorite thing about this controller is the LCD screen here. Just think of this screen as an app onto its own. In the settings, you can remap the buttons. Not only can you remap the button, but this also has macros as well, which is crazy. So for example, I'm going to choose one of the back buttons. And it does a special move. And this is super helpful in the string of combos. As you know, in Street Fighter, you gotta do all sorts of motions, right? And you gotta tie them all together. If you mess up one, you're gonna drop the combo. Being able to program different special moves to each of these buttons, that's gonna make comboing a lot easier. However, I would say that's kind of like cheating, right? But if you play casually, who cares? Isn't that crazy? So I just did the first part of the combo, and then to finish it off, I just press one button. That's it. Alright, let's get to the polling rate test. On wired, minimum input delay 0.66 milliseconds, maximum about 3 milliseconds. Jitter is very good at 0.48 milliseconds. The polling rate is at a blistering 828 Hz, and that results in the average input delay of just over 1 millisecond. And that puts it just right behind the DualSense Edge in terms of polling rate. On the dongle, minimum 1.4 milliseconds, maximum is about 10. Jitter is still very fast at 0.1, and the polling rate is at 205. Average input delay is just a little bit under 5 milliseconds. If you do get this controller, I would highly recommend you play it wired. Alrighty, final thoughts. There is so much to like about this controller. In fact, I love everything about this controller, from the looks to the LCD to the macros and every button, except for where it matters most, which is the D-pad. And honestly, it's an easy fix. They just need to make the D-pad a little looser so that there's more give for the diagonals to activate, and also make the gaps around the D-pad a little bit bigger. That's it. That's all they gotta do. Alrighty, that's gonna be it for me. Hopefully you found it to be helpful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.